Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the MNCAA Gophers edition, That Gopher Hockey Puckcast. This is episode 125. I'm joined here. Drew Cove is joined alongside Nate Wells, as always, the two of us going every week here this season, bringing you a lot of different Gophers conversation on what happened last week, what happens next week, and everything in between. So, Nate, let's just jump right into it. Gophers played their first conference series this weekend against Penn State. They get the sweep. It wasn't necessarily pretty. It ended up being a 3-1 win on Friday and a 1-0 squeaker on Saturday. But Gophers get the sweep nonetheless. But Nate, let's just start talking about Friday. I think it was a very interesting game from the jump, just because it did look a little sluggish at the start, but the Gophers ended up being able to pull through.
It did look sluggish. Minnesota, both games, kind of continuing from the trend from last week, where just not getting a solid opening 10 minutes, able to get a penalty kill, obviously kill a couple penalty or get a couple power plays themselves, not going anything going on there, which, I mean, they were going against a Penn State team who I think at that up until they finally break through later in the second period, I think had not given up a power play goal the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
So to do that, go down 1-0 at the end of one of those power plays in the final minute of the first period and trail at the end of a period for the first time this season in conference play at home, put themselves in a bad spot for the Gophers. But as we've seen with this team so far this year, it's any time that they are put up against adversity, they have met the challenge and they have risen up to the occasion. You mentioned Jimmy Snuggerud a lot last week, someone who made an impact away from the ice, away from the goals and the score sheet. He certainly did take advantage of it this time on Friday.
Yeah, no, he was the catalyst, I think, for everything good that happened for the Gophers on Friday night, and it was certainly like we both said, it's very sluggish, slow going. It was I can see how a team that's offensively driven as the Gophers could get discouraged by not really getting too many grade A chances on a full 5-minute major penalty, which Penn State did take. They took a full 5-minute major. The Gophers could have scored at will. But they didn't get one passed in that situation. And kind of hearing that Penn State's vaunted penalty kill would be tough to beat. It certainly was, and it was kind of a downswing in the confidence of that offense and being able to make things happen. But Jimmy Snuggerud pulls through. He just rips a shot. I'm thinking of a different. No, yeah, exactly.
You're also so you got the first one there.
I was thinking about. I was worried I was getting them screwed up, but it was a zone entry, and it was a little sloppy from puck handling from both sides. But he just sees a loose puck and he says, "You know what? I'm Jimmy Snuggerud," and just rips it and turns around, doesn't even realize he scored. I was okay. Jim Rich even noted that in the broadcast too. Just like he didn't even celebrate until he had to spin around. Like he did like a full like a 720 or something. And then he was like, all right, did that actually go in? And it was bar down. It was a really, really nice shot. And that's just what you need from a guy like that. From, like, we mentioned it last week. It's like a guy who can do it and inspire his team in a lot of different ways. That's so important, because when he can do it off the puck by just being a bulldog, but when he can do it by just taking a loose puck and using his very noted offensive skill to just say, you know what, let's get back into this game, let's do it. And then boom, right from there, everything changed from just being able to get behind the Penn State defenders. And I mean, I don't know about you, but this Penn State team is very, very pesky. I think that was the word I was thinking about, is that they might not be as talented as the Gophers, but boy, they know how to work against this heavy, fast Big Ten style of play.
Yeah, thankfully Notre Dame is still the same old Notre Dame, because a lot of those reputations in the Big Ten are not they're not going to sit around this year. Yeah, Penn State, this is not your traditional Penn State team. They are they have the defense. They brought in their own transfer goalie. They're tough to play against. They're tough to find a way to score. They swept St. Lawrence. Other than Minnesota, the kept it close against Quinnipiac as well. And nearly made the comeback there. So they're a really tough team to play against, and it's only going to be tougher as we're in November. But I mean, they're kind of flipping the script on their reputation. We'll probably get into a little bit more, but Michigan is doing a little bit of the same. Michigan State's been certainly away from the defensive first team identity that they've had under the past two coaches. So we're getting a little bit more of the Big Ten. I mean, you got Minnesota with the depth scoring. So like this is not your older brother's Big Ten.
Yeah, no, this is the conference has lasted so long. We have been able to see all these era shifts for certain teams, and but yeah, watching Penn State just with their effort and their stingy defense was definitely. I mean, if you watch the first period and a half of the Gophers, specifically from the Gophers standpoint, you realize it was really tough for them to make anything happen, and it was pretty even on shots throughout most of the game, and it definitely flipped on its head the next day. But it was definitely a different a change of scenery, I guess, for the Gophers. Obviously, it's conference play, and it's a team that's ranked number 18. After they've played a few games, I know they played St. Cloud in that exhibition, but it won as an exhibition. It's the first game of the year, blah, blah, blah. But I think that Minnesota looked human again. It looked like they were not just, all right, we're gonna score 7 goals a night and give up 1 or 2 and then outshoot them by 1,000,000 and just kind of roll the victory. But finally, they played a team that really knew how to take it to them, and they still found a way to get the scoring where they could, get the inspiration from the right guys to take that and move on to victory in night 1.
That's the biggest thing is you're seeing with Minnesota is they're finding ways to win, but they have multiple ways to win. It could have really been really easy for that game to get ugly on a Friday, giving up a goal in the final minute. But I mean, Snuggerud's goal, which both the skill of a goal scorer and just the dirty blue collar play to get the puck in the first place. I also like that. That was like the second straight game that Minnesota's kind of had one of those quick turnaround flip goals where it's in the back of the net before anyone knows what's going on. It's a really nice, fun move to have in your arsenal. But I mean, the Gophers have trailed. They've trailed 4 times this year, and it seems like it's less than a period every time that they're able to pull off and come back. 3 times this year. And I don't think they've trailed for more than 15 minutes max. It might even be less than 10 minutes. Just they're able to quickly come back. They're able to maintain their poise and composure and find a way to tie it and find a way to continue playing their style of the game. And I mean, it paid off later in the second period of that Friday game where just they're continuing to create opportunities on power plays. Eventually Snuggerud gets the second one. And for a game where it's kind of going back and forth, you're looking around to see how possession is going to go playing against a team that is sound defensively, that is looking for the face-offs and getting them. And it didn't really feel any different for Minnesota that other than they're finding a way to win a low-scoring game compared to the previous 5.
Yeah, and that's one thing, too, we've seen, I think, over the years from the Gophers coming from out of the initial Bob Motzko era where it was a big transition period, end of Don into Bob. And I think the biggest difference that we noted, at least a couple years ago, was their ability to come back and maintain leads. And that was the kind of the game changer where it's like, all right, are you confident? Like when the Gophers are down, like I think you mentioned it a couple of times, Nate, you were like, all right, the Gophers are down 1 or 2 goals and you're confident they're still going to be able to, like, you're not like, oh my God, if this and this doesn't happen, they're not gonna be able to win. But you were just like, there's a more level of confidence that this team has the ability to come back from a 1 or 2 goal deficit and to hold the lead and not be like, well, let's wait till the other shoe drops. But no, you're pretty confident in their ability. And I think it's another sign early on this year that that identity hopefully is staying with them for this year to come, and certainly a year that has very high expectations. But Nate, let's transition on to Saturday as well. A much different story. they had to win in a very different way than they did any of their previous games.
If you caught the last 30 seconds, you caught them all. It was great.
Exactly. Think about outshooting Omaha 52 to whatever they did, and now to this game, still coming out with a goal. The Gophers were outshot 28-11, and it was a 1-0 shutout victory. The Liam Souliere revenge game. It was Penn State looked much even better to start the game. I think on Saturday, it looked really, really, I guess, lopsided from the Gophers' ability to get the puck. But it just kind of, it went on. And then Jimmy Snuggerud, speaking of, the fourth liner, Jimmy Snuggerud, I knew we wanted to get that worked in somewhere. Fourth liner, Jimmy Snuggerud, tries to inspire his team a little bit, getting physical, and it ended up being a little too physical. Certainly a bad hit along the boards, got a 5-minute major. Funny enough, as the Gophers got one in their favor the day before, but kind of took their best player out of the game, or I mean, arguably their best player. A lot of people, I think, could make a different argument right about now with two players tied for 5th in national scoring, but it certainly was a much different looking game from the same players kind of being notable in different respects, Nate.
Yeah, first off, I really enjoy that Bob's running gag of whichever line is playing well is now the fourth line. It really speaks to the depth, but mostly I just find it enjoyable because there's a stretch where it was the Kurth Clark Wood line would be in the fourth line. Snuggerud scores twice on Friday. You put that line as the fourth line, and I'm a fan of finding those little ways to kind of make little notes for your team and just have fun with the game. And I think he's really doing that. So I really hope somebody asks him about that this week, just his thing of doing that, because it's about the most coach thing you could do, especially for the team where you are trying to spread around the talent and have 4 scoring lines. But I just really enjoy it.
Yeah, it was definitely intriguing to see that, and obviously once Snuggerud was off the ice, it certainly posed a different challenge and kind of forced the Gophers to just kind of play to find other ways to get into it, and they never really did, to be honest. And then you find you get to the end of the game and 30 seconds to go, and not necessarily a harmless shot from the point, but a shot from the point, and Jimmy Clark away. I mean, it wasn't like he was in close on the net to make that redirect. He was up near the top of the circles, almost above the hash marks for sure. And he just throws a stick out and tips it, and it beats Sergeyev. And that's that. And 30 seconds to go, and Penn State doesn't really have an opportunity to come back. And it just seals the game for a guy who I think has had a really tremendous season, obviously playing with some really, really skilled players as well. But one Jimmy for another, Snuggerud out, Clark in to save the day. It was certainly a fun goal to see, but also good to see a guy who I think's who's been looking a lot better than his like we keep mentioning, his unexpected freshman year. It looks like he's really taken it in stride and made a lot of development. It's good to see him get rewarded with 2 goals, not in the one game, but 2 goals on the weekend, the empty netter, and then the game winner.
Yeah, it was an ugly goal. It might be the ugliest goal that Minnesota's had all season, but right place to be in, and smart play, just put it on net, especially that late in the game, try to get anything that's going. Minnesota had a couple of chances. Just they had I think Brody Lamb had a post, a couple other ones where maybe just that extra pass was just trying to be a little too cute. But just when you're looking to get anything going, being in the right place in the right time is what's needed. And we've said so much about Minnesota's goalies playing well, but not needing to necessarily win a game. This was a case where you can make the case that Liam Souliere won the game for Minnesota, and to do it against do it against a team that he knows very well is certainly, I'm sure, felt really great for him.
Yeah, no, it's certainly intriguing. I think Souliere finally pulling off that victory was really incredible, and I think a good weekend of hockey from both goalies. I think Ari looked good from the 21 shots he faced on Friday, but Souliere stopping 28 of 28. That's what you need on a weekend when the scoring doesn't necessarily come, and you're playing a pretty heavy team that has some some dynamic offensive threats, but is really going to stifle the offense. It's good to know that that Souliere's got the ability to play the perfect game, really, and to make the team have a chance up until the final 30 seconds of a scoreless game, rather than let it get to overtime or something like that. It certainly helped a lot as the year goes on. It'll help a lot that was in regulation, but a very good showing from Liam Souliere in his first game against his former team. And I know, Nate, you had a stat where what was your stat about Penn State and Minnesota over the last few years?
He had lost 8 straight being a net with Penn State before he finally wins one against Penn State. So now it's 9.
Okay, so 9 straight games with Souliere in net. Minnesota has beaten Penn State.
Yeah, and he had a save against Aiden Fake, who I mean, we talk about Penn State talent. I mean, he's certainly at the top of the list. Where it almost made me think, I'm like, how much is being super familiar with his style, his play, and his shot, and taking the shots in practice every day for a year, how much of that makes a difference? Because it certainly seems like it, but just yeah, if you're Liam, I'm sure you are waking up. I'm sure you woke up at the end of the week and just feeling fantastic about having that and just being able to kind of prove yourself, continuing to prove yourself with being on a team that right now 7-1, 7 regulation wins.
Mm-hmm.
The one loss is in overtime. It's about as good. I mean, it's as good as it can be without being undefeated, obviously, but if you're Minnesota, you're feeling fantastic. 6 points in Big Ten play, top of the table there at the moment. So you're feeling great.
Yeah, and kind of just onto the weekend as a whole, Nate, with a couple of victories, like you mentioned, 7-1 now. It does, I think, like I said earlier too, the Gophers definitely looked like they came down to earth just a little bit from the scoring perspective, facing a pretty dominant defensive team again. Kurth Clark Wood, only 4 points from them on the weekend. Just what a disappointing showing. I hope everyone can tell the sarcasm in my voice in that one, but still, that line's gonna find its ways. But even on the weekends when it's 4 goals on the weekend, they're gonna factor in some of them. But yeah, it's just going to matter going forward to see. And like you mentioned, ugly goal. I was like, wow, I'm surprised Mason Nevers wasn't involved in the ugly goal. That seems to be like his forte. It's like if a goal goes in and no one ever realizes that, it's usually Mason Nevers throwing his hands up like, hey, that was me. Me. I did that. And so they're going to need a lot more of those against these heavy Big Ten teams, Notre Dame, Penn State. They're going to need going forward. They're going to need guys like that, plus all the people that showed up so far to make those games happen, and to say, okay, when Jimmy Snuggerud's off the ice. I think we did this last year when Jimmy got knocked out of a game for a misconduct. But it's like, who are you going to turn to with that? And the Gophers, it looks like this year, have plenty more options than they did last year, or at least seemingly proven options. 8 games of proof so far that they can be able to take over the mantle, considering Jimmy only had 1 goal coming into the weekend. So very good to see from all of that. But Big Ten definitely looks like it will be better than the non-conference this year. That's one thing I noted from this series versus the last series, Nate. What do you think? I think it looks like the Gophers non-conference was decidedly worse than Big Ten play. And when's the last time you think we could have said that?
It's been a while, because Minnesota always lines up with the Minnesota teams. I mean, there's been a run of high-end elite Minnesota outstate schools for the last 5 to 8 years, where you're not saying that everyone's down, but you play St. Cloud in a exhibition, so that doesn't count.
Mm-hmm.
Mankato's looking fairly decent, but they don't play the Mavericks. Duluth is about as down as they've been recently. I mean, credit though to St. Thomas came back and they split with Augustana, but they beat but they won fairly convincingly against the Vikings. I keep wanting to say Augustana's the Augies. I know they're not.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just me. I'm just assuming. I just go into that one, but but at least they still look like they're the decent team. But I think you're missing that where it's Duluth is a little down. You don't play North Dakota. There's maybe one other high end team that is off the schedule, so you're kind of missing that one. And college hockey has had a lot of fantastic non-conference games this season, so
yes,
we're not missing out on that. Minnesota's getting right back into that next season where North Dakota's back on the schedule. Denver's on there. I think they play BC at some point. There's certainly some ones like they have some non-conference heavyweights coming back in. So it's not as much on that end for the Gophers, but it really does speak to the Big Ten, where you're looking at the teams that are, or I believe there was 6 teams were ranked this past week. Ohio State was picked 7th by the coaches, and they're 7. I think they're 7-0-1, so they're up there high as well. No conference has a non-conference record as good as the Big Ten. It's not even close right now, where we can nitpick some of the losses, but we're pretty much nitpicking the majority of the losses. Everybody's pulling their own weight, and it's really going to show come March, where if you have that quality of a conference, and the teams are going to be playing one another and beating up on one another, and you're being tested week in, week out, it's going to be great for the league come tournament time.
Yeah, and like you said, it's I think you noted too, just like how much better the non-conference for the Big Ten is than the traditional other power conferences in college hockey, Hockey East, and NCHC, to name a few. While we've certainly made a big deal of some of the lopsided losses that maybe shouldn't have happened in to various teams around the league and around the state, it certainly looks like the Big Ten is set up even better than the rest of those conferences, just because it shows like we talk about parity all the time, and college hockey is getting more and more similar every year, and the difference between 1 and 20 is a lot different than it might have used to have been. But kind of moving forward now back into the conference, into the Big Ten. And I think I'm ready to say again, the best conference in college hockey. I was definitely not feeling it early in the year on the stability of the Big Ten maintaining its status 3 years running as the best conference in college hockey. But I do think it is back. But leading us to some scores from around the conference / the state and the region here over the past weekend. Ohio State, they swept Lake State. They put an Ovechkin up on Lakers on Friday, 9-3, and then I think it was 6-3 the next day. Just a crazy amount of scoring. What are your thoughts on Ohio? Do you think Ohio State? I mean, to me, it looks like Ohio State's not going to be the basement anymore. Looks like another team in red might take up that mantle, but there's still a lot of season left. But what do you, I mean, have you seen anything from Ohio State this year? I know I wasn't able to catch their games this weekend, but seeing the uptick in scoring has got to be a good sign for this team to make some way in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, it's really tough to come across who's going to be that last place team. And honestly, I think the bar is so high for the Big Ten, where it almost was the case last year where Ohio State, they were played so well in non-conference that despite struggling immensely in the first half against Big Ten play, they were still in like the low 30s, high 20s in the pairwise as the basement team in the Big Ten. For Steve Rawlick's team, one of those underrated storylines for me was that it seemed like things were kind of putting together in the second half of the season. They had a couple of players who were starting to stand out. I think they made some really underrated moves in the transfer portal. They got Gunnar Wolf Fontaine, the great Beanpot champion from Northeastern.
Top 5 name in college hockey.
Yes. Sure. Oh, easily on your all name college hockey list. But they have some talent. It feels like sometimes you never know what you're going to get in the transfer portal, if how people are going to come together with the team, how it fits with the culture. And this feels like this one works a little bit better than how last season, especially in the first half, nothing was kind of clicking. And by the time it was a little bit too little too late. I'm still trying to make a little sense of the Buckeyes. I mean, other than Wisconsin, those games were kind of close, were certainly close. You can't really say they've played in an immensely tough schedule. So, I mean, Lake State is certainly near the bottom of the CCHA. That game was crazy. The Friday game was crazy, by the way, with the 9. It was like 4-0. Lake State comes back to 4-3, and then all of a sudden, like the Ohio State, I blink and Ohio State's up to 9. I don't know how, but just goals were just happening out of like goals. It's just crazy. So I'm still a little bit wait and see on Ohio State. I don't think they're as good as the record. I don't think they're as bad as they were last year. They're somewhere in between. They're certainly going to, but they're always a tough out, and that really speaks to just the job that Steve Frolick does. We kind of say the same thing with Penn State right now with what they're doing, and we saw them obviously this past weekend. But for me, the one that really stands out is Michigan going to Boston and sweeping BU. For
exactly.
One, there haven't been too many Big Ten Hockey East games so far this year, so that's going to be big in the pairwise.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that, where those teams kind of, you look on paper and they kind of feel a little familiar, where they're talented, they're young, they're trying to put things together. You've seen some streaky goals, some streaky play on both ends. You're not sure how it was, and it kind of turned out a little bit that way, where BU led Michigan. Mm-hmm. I guess they led Boston too.
They definitely did.
Not till that third period. When they're up 1-0 in the third period of Friday, and then all of a sudden Michigan scores and the game flips on its head to 5-1. It's kind of a little bit of that 2022 national championship game. Sorry, any MNCAA fans who are listening to this one, but you see Michigan able to pull it off, and they're winning. They're playing low score. They have the talent. They don't have kind of that offensive defenseman that they've had in the past. They're missing a couple players over the weekend, but for me, that's a move. I don't think I would see Michigan the last 2 years pulling off the sweep against BU.
And especially coming back, I think that was a team that when they got frustrated and they shut down a little bit. And there wasn't a lot of coming back unless there was some kind of individual effort that kind of willed them to victory. But seeing that type of thing is definitely, they've looks like they've shaken off the losing to Minnesota State rust from the earlier this season to beat the number 11 team, going to the number 5 team and sweeping them at home. Certainly a very big development in college hockey, because it's going to be, it's like you said, pairwise, it's going to mean something. And just kind of seeing the competitive nature of those two teams that likely are going to be maybe floating around to meet in the tournament at some point. It certainly come spring.
Certainly are. And it's one of those things where I think you look before the weekend, you'd probably put BU in that tier with Minnesota, mm-hmm. BC, Michigan State, and maybe look around. You're like, between that series, the Friday night game in North Dakota, maybe there's still a bit more work for them to do. Maybe perception wise, they might fall a little bit in your eyes. But at the same time, for me, that's a huge statement by the Wolverines. Not something I really expected. And this is kind of this time of year where we're still trying to figure out all the pieces and where they fit and how teams are going. And I mean, it's still a work in progress. Look, I'm in New York City. The marathon just happened. Just happened the day where we're recording this. So mm-hmm. I kind of still have that in my mind. But it's one of those things where you don't win a marathon running the first few miles. You are working towards it. You're trying to get better and better as it goes on. And each of these teams are going to look completely different on March 1st than they are on November 1st. So.
Absolutely. It's going to be a different look, and for sure one look that we are waiting to see because there's a mystery voter in the USCHO poll that keeps voting Cornell as number 1. And you know what? Whoever you are vindicated because they swept North Dakota this past weekend. Big sweep against North Dakota for Cornell. In I think it was their first games of the year. Talk about, obviously they're doing a good job of making sure their non-conference schedule is stacked and against quality opponents. But I think the Cornell voter knows a lot more than the rest of us do. And I'll put forth my apologies towards a few jabs at, oh yeah, look at Cornell getting the courtesy vote for number 1. they may have a legitimate claim for that, Nate. And I know Gophers fans listening to this are going to be very, very happy that a team that hasn't played any games came in and just made North Dakota look a little silly.
I need to know who in the Ivy Leagues are making these schedules, because you're already behind a month. And Cornell opens up against North Dakota. Like Yale also did the same thing where they hosted Denver, and I'm just looking. I was texting with a friend who is a Yale fan, and just like I'm like, someone needs to get fired for this, because this is just malpractice. You have not only are you playing, like, I get it, like it's great to have Denver come to your town, come to your building, and I'm sure fans enjoyed that, but holy crap, you go against you play your first games of the season, you get that nice little like Ivy League jamboree going the weekend before, so maybe that helps a little bit, but everyone else is already in second gear. You're starting, and you're starting against the national champs who are undefeated and just on a roll. Like that's malpractice. The same thing with Cornell. I get it, there's only so many non-conference games you can go and fit in, but man, playing North Dakota in your opener and then coming out, and granted, Cornell returns almost their entire team from last year, so that one might be a little bit less than the Bulldogs. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, to do that and to beat a Fighting Hawks team that, yes, I will grant the RSA faces some injury concerns, and they had a couple more in the Friday game, but to do that and go out to a 3-1 lead really early in the Friday and just be able to kind of shut things down and make it extremely tough against a good North Dakota team, that's really impressive. And I'm sure lone Cornell Ivy League voter for the first place gets a friend or two this week.
Exactly. I certainly think so. And Nate, one last score around the conference, or something that certainly the listening population of this podcast might be interested in, against the upcoming series for the Gophers. The Gophers play Wisconsin this coming weekend. They played against Notre Dame, and they split. They lost in overtime on Friday. Wisconsin lost in overtime on Friday, and ended up getting their second victory of the season on Saturday. Nate, I know we've talked about Wisconsin a lot. We certainly talked about them last week. What do you think is in store for the Gophers in this border battle weekend?
It should still be a tough series. There's no easy games in the Big Ten. Wisconsin is still this weekend. I'm still trying to figure out Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's still trying to figure out Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's a team where depth scoring is non-existent. A lot of these games are very low scoring. I mean, obviously, you're not really going to be surprised against a Notre Dame series to see low scoring games, but it's one of those things where you have a team in the Gophers who are bringing 4 lines of depth and are comfortable playing in high-end back and forth games. They're finding ways to win low-scoring battles. They make you pay for mistakes. They are able to utilize their depth in ways that most schools have not been able to do this year. And to do so against a Wisconsin team that just is pretty much reliant on a set amount of players and still trying to find their way, it's either going to be, we're going to be talking a little bit more next week about whether Wisconsin's able to kind of find themselves, or if it's Minnesota, or if it's just more of the same for Minnesota that we've seen for the first month of the season.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you, is that Wisconsin's going to learn if they can hang with the class of the conference. Not just that the Gophers are the class of the conference, but I think they're in a different tier of, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota are, I think, the clear top teams in the conference. And while Notre Dame is a tough test, especially defensively, I think Wisconsin's going to figure out a lot about themselves this coming weekend and realize whether, all right, is this still a team that we can work around to and make the tournament somehow, or and really feel good about it, or is this kind of a sort of a in between year? And that's, I think it's going to be a lot of things that are learned about Wisconsin in this next weekend. I don't think as much for Minnesota, but Wisconsin's going to figure out a lot about itself, especially if Minnesota, it's incumbent upon Minnesota to come as their usual selves. I don't have any reason to believe that they won't do that, considering it seems like they've done that for the last 8 games. But it'll be an interesting series nonetheless, because it's always an interesting time when the Gophers are playing the Badgers. I mean, look at some of the lean Tony Granato years as well. The Gophers found ways to lose to those teams. So it's going to be it's always an interesting weekend against Wisconsin.
Yeah, this rivalry brings out some passion from both sides, and I don't expect anything different for that to be the case. I think you might have hit the nail on the head there, Drew, where Wisconsin are still trying to figure out, are they close to the top tier of the Big Ten, or are they more near the bottom? And right now, certainly things are going slower than Mike Hastings would certainly like with this team. But there's still some aspects where you're like, this is a better team than the record shows. Mm-hmm. They haven't been able to slowly put it together. But at the same time, you only have you only have so much to work with. And until Wisconsin's able to do more to utilize that their depth, and they're able to hold on to leads, they're able to show that they can win in more games than a 2-1, or come back and kind of hold things close. Until then, I can't put them in that top tier. I can see them putting things together as the season goes on, but for me right now, I don't see that being the case. And this weekend's going to be a great opportunity for the Badgers to do so. And I'm excited. I'm excited for. I always enjoy the Minnesota Wisconsin games. So it doesn't matter what's going to happen. It doesn't matter if Minnesota's down and Wisconsin's up. If Wisconsin's down and Minnesota's up, these are always just fun games.
Yeah, exactly. And I know just 2 years, not even two full years into the Mike Hastings era of Wisconsin hockey. It's certainly I think they overachieved last year. They did a lot better than anyone expected them to, but maybe they're kind of coming back down to earth with even some of the changes and kind of falling back more into a traditional rebuilding cycle. So even while Wisconsin might be look a lot more down than they want to be right now, I think they're going to be good for years to come under Mike Hastings, as we've seen his teams do in the past, is kind of stay competitive and stay really good. So, but that should be a very fun weekend. We'll be back here next week to talk about all that happens with it and around the conference as well. But for Nate and me, until next time, we will see you at the rink.